Hello hockey fans, and welcome back to another video. If there's one thing that every hockey player in the world can agree on, it's that their stick is one of the most essential pieces of their equipment. Whether you're scoring a highlight reel goal, intercepting a pass, or stopping a shot, no player's setup is truly complete until they are wielding a curved piece of carbon fibre in their hands. Though the rulebook is quite clear on what you can and can't do with your own stick, the rules surrounding using another player's stick are questionable at best. When it comes to using an opponent's stick though, the general consensus is that you should never do so, not only because it doesn't belong to you or your team, but due to the mutual level of respect that either side should have for both each other and their equipment. Given that it's practically unheard of for a player to use an opponent's stick during a hockey game, and given that most pro teams have a number of sticks available for every member of their roster, there's no way that a player should ever want or need to steal an opposing player's stick, right? Wrong. Thanks to one skater's actions before a KHL game, a seemingly harmless incident quickly turned into one of the most unusual situations I have ever heard of, complete with an arena-wide search, a team-led cover-up, and a contract termination. Buckle up, folks, this one's gonna get a little crazy. This is the story of the stolen stick scandal. In order to tell this pretty bizarre tale, let me first introduce you to a player by the name of Jordan Murray. Now I imagine that most, if not all of you watching this, have no idea who Murray is, and given the trajectory of his career, I certainly don't blame you. After all, Murray is a 28-year-old defenseman who has spent the last few years grinding it out in the minors before moving to Europe for the current 2021 season, so he isn't exactly the most well-known player within the wider hockey world. That said, the blue liner didn't let his lack of name recognition stop him from playing a vital role in this whole ordeal, so allow me to give you a brief overview of Murray's career up until this incident took place, so we all understand how he became the catalyst behind this ridiculous situation, and how he was finally able to get his name out there, but for all the wrong reasons. An undrafted player in each of his years of eligibility, Murray would instead spend a trio of seasons in the QMJHL, where he would split his time between the Acadie Bathurst Titan and the Drummondville Voltages, and scored 95 points in 186 regular season games. After notching 13 goals and 56 points with Drummondville during the 12-13 season, and with him still eligible to play another year in the Q as an overager, the 19-year-old decided to move much closer to home and focus on his education instead, as he joined the University of New Brunswick for the 13-14 season. From there, the Canadian defenseman would spend the next 4 years of his career with the Varsity Reds, and to say that he played well for the team would be an absolute understatement. Not only would the blue liner go on to score 101 points in exactly 101 games, he would also earn a lengthy list of accolades, as he was named First Team All-Canadian and Defenseman of the Year on 3 separate occasions, was named a Tournament All-Star twice, while also helping New Brunswick lift 2 national championships and a conference championship too. Yeah, I think he had a pretty good run with the team, don't you? Once the 16-17 U Sports season had come to an end, and having scored 40 points in just 30 games that year, Murray would finally earn a contract with a pro hockey team, as he signed an amateur tryout deal with the AHL's Binghamton Senators on April 5th, 2017. After scoring 2 points and registering a +2 in 5 games, the 24-year-old would earn himself a 2-year contract with the team later that same month. In fact, apart from a 3-game stint with the ECHL's Brampton Beast during the following 17-18 season, Murray would go on to play the next 3 years of his career exclusively with the Senators, moving with the team to Belleville after their relocation and scoring 85 points in 174 AHL games. With 6 goals and 34 points in 57 games during the recent 2019-20 season, and with the current global pandemic putting North American hockey on an extended pause, Murray knew that if he wanted to keep earning a paycheck as a pro hockey player, he would need to look for employment overseas. Though he had set a number of Senators franchise records, including games played, goals, assists and points all by a defenseman since the franchise had moved to Belleville, on October 2nd, 2020, Murray signed a 1-year contract with the KHL's Dinamo Riga for the remainder of the 2021 season. So having gone undrafted by every NHL team nearly a decade ago, and having finally cemented his reputation as a legitimate presence in the pro hockey world, Jordan Murray was taking his talents across the pond for the very first time in order to see if he could match up against the best players in Europe. Unfortunately though, his actions over the coming months would bring his time in the K to a premature end. Once he had made the move to Latvia and joined Dinamo's roster, Murray wouldn't take long to make an impact for his new team, both positively and negatively. The 28-year-old would score 7 points in his first 11 games of the season, but he would also register 18 penalty minutes and a -3 in that span. To make matters even worse, Murray would then be sidelined for the next 6 weeks of the year after suffering an injury against SKA St. Petersburg on December 7th. An injury that would ultimately keep him out of the lineup for the rest of his tenure with the team. So even though he had notched decent scoring numbers, the Blue Liners' transition to the KHL game was still a work in progress, as he was having difficulty staying out of the penalty box and was still adjusting to a new style of defence. That said, Murray had proven that he was more than capable of holding his own in Europe's top league, and had become one of the more productive players on a team that was sat firmly in the league's basement. However, it is at this point that the scandal begins. Just a few hours before Riga was set to host Avangard Omsk on January 27th, Avangard forward and former NHL star Ilya Kovalchuk reported that one of his sticks had gone missing from his team's locker room. According to the reports at the time, Kovalchuk had used the stick during a practice session earlier that day, but when he returned to the dressing room for game time, he discovered that the stick was nowhere to be found. After Kovalchuk reported the missing stick, security guards were tasked with finding the piece of equipment and returning it to its rightful owner. Having searched the entire arena and having still come up empty-handed, staff members then decided to check security footage taken earlier that day in order to figure out where the stick might have gone. As they scrolled through the recordings, the security guards discovered that the stick had been taken from the locker room by someone else at the arena. It was at this point that the staff made a shocking discovery. Upon further investigation of the footage, it was revealed that the person behind this act was none other than Riga defenseman Jordan Murray. According to reports at the time, video recordings showed Murray leaving the away team's locker room with the stick in his hands, attempting to hide the stolen property in 3 separate locations around the arena, before leaving the premises altogether with the stick still in his possession. You really can't make this stuff up, can you, folks? Oh, but we're not done there. Before the culprit was correctly identified, it is reported that several members of Riga's organisation tried to blame a cleaner for the stick going missing. In a crude attempt to preserve their franchise's reputation, the team suggested that a cleaning lady had mistaken the stick for a broken piece of equipment as it was supposedly left laying on the locker room floor. That said, when it was revealed that one of their own players had taken it, the team quickly backtracked. Though they would pull a complete U-turn on their previous statements, it appeared as if Murray would face little to no consequences for his actions, as Riga seemed uninterested in handing out any sort of punishment to their player. In fact, during a press conference later that day after the game, Riga head coach Peteris Skudra suggested that Murray could return to Dinamo's lineup for their upcoming game against Severstal Sharopovets, as he was close to recovering from his injury. However, this lack of repercussions wouldn't last very long, as just the following day, Riga announced that they had terminated Murray's contract with the team. So less than a dozen games into his KHL career, Jordan Murray had seen his tenure in the league come to an unceremonious end after he had stolen a stick from a member of the opposing team. That's certainly one of the more unique ways to lose your job, folks? What makes this whole situation even more bizarre, though, is when you hear Ilya Kovalchuk's version of the events. In an interview with Sports.ru on February 18th, Kovalchuk said that he had no idea the kind of adventure his stick had been on until he saw it had been picked up by the media later that day. The former NHLer explained how he had prepared a stick for a morning practice and was planning to use that same stick in the game later that day, but when he returned to the arena a few hours later for puck drop, it had somehow disappeared. When the Russian forward asked the equipment staff where it had gone, they had no idea what he was talking about and even asked him whether he had confused himself before the stick was miraculously recovered. Though the player responsible ended up losing his job, Kovalchuk stated that in his opinion, the situation was not at all serious. In fact, he emphasised that he is more than happy to give someone one of his sticks if he has one on hand to spare. So if Murray had just asked Kovalchuk for a stick, he might have still got his hands on one and still kept his job too. And that's why you need to learn your manners, kids. Now I know what you're thinking. Why on earth did Murray take Ilya Kovalchuk's stick? Why did he make the conscious choice to go into the opposing team's locker room and steal a piece of equipment from a player on the other team? Well, at the time of this recording, we still don't know for sure. Since Murray is no longer employed by a KHL team, and given that he has refused to comment on the situation in the several weeks that have followed, his motives for taking the stick haven't been confirmed yet. That said, I think we can all make an educated guess. When I first heard about this incident, my initial reaction was that Murray did this for one of two reasons. Either he was trying to get Kovalchuk's attention, or he was trying to pull a prank on him. After putting some more thought into it though, neither of these options seem to make much sense. I mean, come on guys, if Murray wanted to get Kovalchuk's attention and perhaps strike up a conversation with him, I think we can all agree that stealing his hockey stick isn't the best idea. After all, the veteran would likely wonder why a professional hockey player had taken his property and wasted his time, which could result in a pretty negative encounter depending on Kovalchuk's mood that day. Also, if Murray was trying to play a prank on Kovalchuk, why did he leave the premises with the stick still in his possession? Hiding the piece of equipment in various places around the arena makes sense, as Murray would have likely wanted to make sure that Kovalchuk couldn't find it, but if this was all just a joke, surely Murray would have eventually owned up to it and returned the stick to Kovalchuk before the game, right? And besides, how often do you hear that a player has pulled a prank on an opponent? Practically never, right? Unless the two players are really good friends, which they aren't, or they're at a fun, light-hearted event like the All-Star game, which they weren't, pranking a member of the opposing team is bound to end in some bad blood, especially if the prank is in poor taste or it goes horribly wrong. So if it wasn't done for attention and it wasn't a prank, then what was it? Well, if you ask me, I think Jordan Murray straight up tried to steal Ilya Kovalchuk's stick for himself. I believe that Murray thought that he could sneak into the opposing team's locker room before the game, nab himself a souvenir from one of the KHL's best players while he was in town, and flee the crime scene before anyone noticed what he had done. Just think about it. Murray walked into a room, likely filled with tens if not hundreds of hockey sticks, and took the only one that was taped up by Kovalchuk himself. Why else would he do that? I think Murray saw an opportunity to add a used Kovalchuk stick to his collection, and he took it, both literally and figuratively. After all, the guy hid the stick 3 different times before eventually taking it off the premises. He clearly wanted to keep it to himself, you know. Of course, this is all just my opinion, as his motives still haven't been revealed yet, but considering how rarely something like this happens within the sport of hockey, I really can't think of any other explanation. But regardless of why he did it, Murray did do it, and thus he had to suffer the consequences of his actions. Consequences that ultimately cost him both his job and a position in the best league in Europe. However, that doesn't mean his season was over just yet. Following this bizarre incident, Jordan Murray would leave Dinamo's roster and look for employment elsewhere in the hockey world. Thankfully, he wouldn't have to wait long to find another team interested in his services, as on February 1st, Murray signed with HV71 of the Swedish Hockey League for the remainder of the 2021 season. Though he has joined his new organisation and suited up for the team ever since, the Canadian defenceman has struggled to produce similar numbers compared to his time in Riga, as he has gone scoreless and registered a -3 in his first 5 games with the team at the time of this recording. With the SHL season fast approaching its conclusion, and with HV71 battling tooth and nail for a playoff berth, Murray is going to need to find his rhythm and fast if he wants to earn another shot with the team next year. On the flip side though, after his stick was finally returned to him, Ilya Kovalchuk went on to use it against Riga that night, where he would register a lone assist to help Avangard take a 2-1 victory over Dinamo. In fact, the 37-year-old has continued his strong scoring pace all year long by notching 15 points in 15 KHL games at the time of this recording, so he has shown no signs of slowing down or having been affected by this incident in any way. Maybe Kovalchuk was right. Perhaps this whole situation wasn't that serious after all. Still kinda crazy though, right guys? So what began as a missing piece of equipment quickly turned into an arena-sized investigation, an organisational cover-up, and the termination of a player's contract, all in less than 24 hours. I think I speak for most of you watching this when I say that this whole situation was pretty ridiculous from start to finish. After all, hearing that a professional hockey player has been fired from his job for stealing another player's stick sounds so stupid that it can't possibly be true, but it was. Not only that, this whole ordeal took place in one of the most talented and well-paid leagues in the entire hockey world. If that doesn't make this whole thing seem even more absurd, I don't know what will. Should Murray have taken Kovalchuk's stick? Probably not. Should he have lost his job because of it? That's certainly up for debate. Does this all really matter in the grand scheme of things? No, not really. But was it pretty funny to hear about? You're damn right it was. And that's the story of the stolen stick scandal. What do you guys think about this whole ordeal? Is it one of the more interesting incidents you've heard about in recent months, or is it the kind of thing you have come to expect from the KHL these days? Let me know in the comments below, I would love to hear what you guys think. But thank you very much for watching guys, I hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye. A big thank you to Carl Fairbank, Chris Gadsby, Connor B, Drew Fawcett, Houston NG, Jordan Whitehead, Tom from Finland, and Worthless Pieces for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.